OpenAI admits that its own models were actually weaponized in the massive Hugging Face breach. I'm gonna look into that. In one of those stories that is just so like unhuman, AI is now detecting what they call personalities, but they're the individual quirks, the characteristics of 3D printers, even if they're manufactured exactly the same. They're like the tiniest manufacturing errors you would never be able to see. But then it made me wonder about human personalities and anthropomorphic personalities, and it like became this whole thing. Look at a Matrona blog, which is called AI Mania is Eviscerating Global Decision Making. There's a lot to this. Marco Gutierrez is gonna give us the update on the new, as he says down here, renewed billionaire brawl. You can pick your side. Which one do you think is the scammer? Which one do you think is doing the scamming? Gotcha. There's a new unified atlas of brain data. This is going to be a really powerful data. Well, you don't want to call it like a data set, but a data representation for AIs to build off of. We'll look at some fascinating research about what cities of the future might look like if we actually removed all cars from a city and everything was autonomous, where we could have just people pick up and rent a car, just, you know, Uber style for wherever they're going. Every package could do the same. How many cars do we really need? Like, what does the space look like? How much do we get back? I'll segue that into some interesting thoughts about why China is just so good at taking over the EV market around the world. I mean, the truth is they probably would be very comparable to Tesla in the US if we didn't have these huge, like, tariffs blocking them. But look at how every other country is just starting to get sucked into this whole China electric car thing. Then we'll look at the frontier of where Chinese AI models are and if they really are taking the US tech industry by surprise, as the article claims. Interesting new MemGhost attack. It plants persistent false memories in AI agents through single emails. I'll break down this new OpenAI model that's actually disproved a central conjecture in discrete geometry. I always wonder about AI when it's like breaking these math things, but this is a pretty fascinating read. If nothing else, the conjecture itself is sort of fascinating. Like, how many of these dots can be just like one unit away from another unit? And then I'll leave you with some thoughts about how researchers are reshaping relationships between humans and intelligent machines, because this is definitely happening. But if this kind of content is helpful for any of your friends, please hit that share button and share it with them. That's one of the best ways to help this channel grow. Okay, so let's start with this massive story. AI model escapes its test environment just to cheat a benchmark. Like, this is the story of our future. What happens when an AI finds a security hole that nobody knew existed? So let me break down what's going on here if you haven't already been up on it. OpenAI and Hugging Face just discovered what they describe as an unprecedented AI security incident. It happened during an internal evaluation designed to measure how capable advanced models are at carrying out complex cyber attacks. The models weren't using their normal safety systems because the whole point was to test their limits. So when OpenAI's model was trying to solve this security benchmark called Exploit Gym, the model found a previously unknown software flaw, a 0-day, meaning like a vulnerability that the vendors didn't know about. And it used that to escape a tightly controlled research environment, worked through multiple privilege escalation steps, and eventually reached a machine with internet access. From there, the model inferred that Hugging Face might host information related to the benchmark, then chained together stolen credentials and an additional 0-day vulnerability to reach Hugging Face's production systems and obtain the test solution. So just take a second though. Like, we always talked about this happening, but this is super hyper intelligence, basically beyond any human, solving problems that, I mean, maybe the best cybersecurity people in the world, a big team of them working for weeks, sometimes pull stuff like this off. But if this is something that these models are just capable of at the snap of a finger, at a prompt, like, well, I don't know. Think about what kind of world we're about to enter. OpenAI says that its own security team detected the unusual activity while Hugging Face's security team and AI agents stopped and controlled it on their infrastructure. In response, both companies are investigating the incident, patching the vulnerabilities, tightening evaluation environments, and adding stronger safeguards for future testing. How long can we keep this up for? Right? Like, seriously, we patch it up and another 7 months, 3 months, 1 day of testing go by, and yeah, it's all contained. And then at the same time, we keep increasing model capabilities at breakneck speed. Let's just build 10 more servers so we can increase model capabilities, even though we can like barely contain what we have right now. This just makes no sense for humanity as a whole, and I don't know why we keep doing it. Just because of big piles of money, I guess, that only billionaires will enjoy for like 2 months before this whole thing gets out of control and nobody gets any benefit. Anyway, sorry, my doomerism is showing sometimes, but let's also talk about a really interesting, not dangerous thing, that AI is now detecting the personalities of individual 3D printers, and it's pretty neat, actually. So imagine you have anything that comes off the line, iPhones, mugs, cars, whatever. Every car should be identical. Every 3D printer should be 3D printing the exact same thing. I mean, a CAD model is super precise, it's super exact, but every 3D printer, even if it was made from the same parts and has the same joints and the same actuators, sometimes it just comes together a tiny bit different. And those differences are not that much different than how humans have personalities. So they call them AI personalities of individual 3D printers. And if you think about a human walking through, say, a factory with hundreds of 3D printers all working at the same time, maybe one breaks and some service person is like, oh, that one's broken, fix the actuator, puts it back. But you would never have a human understand, oh, yeah, that one over there, that's like Tom. It's got this micro thing that it does, and its products are like the tiniest millimeter-ish slower or take longer to cool or whatever it is. But 3 identical 3D printers can secretly behave like 3 different machines. Factories often use many copies of the same machine, assuming that they'll all perform the same way. But researchers found that that's not always true, especially when it comes to 3D printers, I guess, because their algorithm starts by giving each machine a kind of performance profile, measuring the small differences in how it operates. Then it decides what to do next. If the machines are similar enough, it optimizes them together to save time, but if they're meaningfully different, it switches to turning one of them on individually for better accuracy. And to test the idea, the team ran it on 3 theoretically identical 3D printers. All 3 were purchased, unboxed, same company, same manufacturer. They can even have the same serial number. Every component should be the same. But instead of finding nearly identical behavior, the algorithm detected that each printer had its own distinct output pattern, so its own personality. And in this case, actually optimizing each printer separately produced better results. And we always talk about AI being this future where we all get custom everything. I forgot that every single object gets a custom everything also. Because I just imagine if there were 10 identical cars, they're all just pretty much identical. 10 refrigerators, 10, toasters. No, each one should get their own LLM, get their own metrics and benchmarks. Why not? This is the world of AI where intelligence becomes like pennies. And the researchers reported that this approach reached good settings faster and reduced errors in the weight of the printed parts compared with treating every printer as the same. The chemical synthesis, building materials, building, who knows, food, probably pills, food prep, sensor calibration. Any place where there's just this huge warehouse, this manufacturing warehouse and an assembly line. This seems like an amazing way to think about using AI. Next up, let's talk about how AI mania is eviscerating global decision making. So, kind of in a nutshell, this article is arguing that the biggest risk from AI isn't the models themselves, even though we just talked about how capable they are, but it's the way organizations are making decisions around them. There's a million ways you can take this kind of a concept, but this author, Nikhil Suresh, is saying that across the many companies that they've worked for and observed, AI projects are routinely presented as successful even when they struggle to deliver meaningful results. There's also this whole underworld of employees now feel pressure to claim that they used AI even when they didn't. A lot of managers are getting rewarded for visible AI adoption, and they're getting rewarded for that sometimes more than actual useful outcomes, right? And then it's this weird loop, right? The essay's conclusion is kind of that this creates this feedback loop where hype reinforces more hype. And then executives get to say, oh, we're saving money, we're using AI, we're first to adopt, because they're worried if they don't, that it's going to hurt the relationship with their investors, their customers, their boards, their investors, all of these people that they've made promises to about AI adoption. And then there's always so much money invested into it. You don't want to be like, oh, it's actually not worth it, yet, right? And we're seeing this all across the board. So if organizations stop measuring real outcomes and start rewarding belief instead, then good technology can, of course, lead to bad decisions. Okay, but this game theory part is what sort of worried me the most. Because you might ask yourself, why would a smart leader keep repeating numbers they privately doubt? What if many AI executives don't even believe their own AI claims? And the weird thing about it is that the AI hype might be driven by office politics and money, more than just the technology. But I do believe the huge technology is there, and it's scary and it's powerful and it could be wonderful if it's used correctly. But this weird thing where at like times we're overblowing it to get billions of dollars to then create it, and then we're also saying, please don't create it that fast. We don't need it until we kind of know what to do with it and can handle it, so we get the long-term benefit instead of just short-term and then like more problems. And that's what the author is essentially arguing here. Like executives aren't making huge AI claims because they believe them. They're making them because the incentives inside large companies make honesty risky. It just does. Like, being honest is a risky thing. This is one of the reasons, like, we're just talking about all this corruption or whatever, and it's like, it's not always these people. These systems are just so bureaucratic, and you're like, well, why would I take on a risk even if it makes money for the company or something if I'm not going to get rewarded? But I definitely don't want to rock the boat. Definitely don't want to challenge somebody who can keep me in power as long as they like me. In fact, that's one of the fascinating things when I see Claude spin up all its agents. Like, I imagine, I don't know if you guys ever watch Rick and Morty, how there's the Mises can just like pop into existence, solve a problem, and leave. Like, it reminds me of that. These agents like pop in and they're like, hey, just here to double check work on those other agents. I'm all good now. Bye. And then they just disappear. But if they were spun up and then they had to like keep their jobs and justify their jobs, they come up with all this extra stuff to do, right? It's just like, I don't know, it's just so weird. But one example comes from a Fortune 500 executive who privately admitted they were skeptical of the exaggerated productivity claims that their company was promoting, but they said pushing back could damage relationships with customers, it could threaten major contracts, and even their own job. So they just lied. The author actually describes this as a coordination problem, where you can imagine everybody standing on thin ice, afraid to be the first person to admit that it's cracking. If one executive publicly questions the hype, then other leaders may feel attacked, embarrassed, or pressured to defend their earlier statements. So everyone just keeps repeating the same story, even if like many privately see the ice cracking. I can totally see it. I've seen 100 examples of this in my life. Probably going to see many more. All right, now let's get to the feuds. Billionaire versus billionaire. Pick your, I don't know, you can put in the comments which billionaire you hope rules the world soon. Elon Musk, Sam Altman accusing each other of scamming investors as SpaceX and OpenAI jockey to lead the AI revolution. Marco Gutierrez, writing in Fortune. All right, so the lawsuit is in the past. It didn't go through. Elon just waited too long to bring it, so we never really got much out of that. But Elon Musk and Sam Altman are back in a very public fight. The latest round started after Apple sued OpenAI and two former Apple employees claiming that the company's secrets were taken to help build OpenAI's hardware business. OpenAI denied the allegations, saying that it had no interest in other companies' trade secrets. Musk used the lawsuit to attack Altman, calling him a scammer multiple times. Altman fired back by accusing Musk of selling investors on short-term orbital data centers through SpaceX. Ooh, gotcha. Musk responded by defending the plan, making another personal jab, and repeating a claim that Altman stole OpenAI. That's the accusation that goes back so many years about them like not wanting Elon. Gosh, I am so mixed up on that whole thing too. Like, I'm not exactly a fan of having Musk just own like another company. It's like just everything. So for a while there, I was like, oh, it's good. Somebody said like, hey, if you want to take over this nonprofit and turn it profitable, like, and it's meant to actually help the world, you shouldn't be in charge of it because you've got Tesla and all these other things going on. So felt like it was the right decision, but I do wish the board had been able to just get some sort of third governing body to help like regulate this stuff, something where OpenAI was much more transparent and connected, and maybe even partially government funded, and things like just something closer to academia than this weird private two billionaire battle thing going on. But anyways, sorry, tangent there. Musk and Altman co-founded OpenAI in 2015 as a nonprofit focused on developing AI for humanity rather than financial returns. According to this report, the relationship broke down after Musk wanted to take control of OpenAI in 2018, a proposal that Altman and the other leaders rejected after ChatGPT's success. The dispute moved into court. Musk sues OpenAI in 2024 over its shift towards a for-profit structure, while OpenAI argued that Musk only turned against the company after failing to control it. Can't those things both be true? It's not even like an either-or thing. But anyways, a juror dismissed Musk's claim in May on the statute of limitations ground, although Musk says he will appeal. And now they're pointing jabs at each other. You know, that orbital space thing is pretty fascinating. Just simply that question, is Sam Altman right? Like, did he oversell it? And I kind of think so. Like, don't get me wrong. I mean, I've seen what Google has done, and I know that Elon does have access to all sorts of amazing potential for building factories that build spaceships that can actually drop these things off. And clearly, if they're going to build huge servers here on Earth, they can also put them in space. But it just kind of feels like building a bunch more on Earth, or even under the ocean where it's really cold, just seems so much cheaper than getting them into space, even though I know it's really cold up there. And it makes sense. Just the whole infrastructure around having tons of people and robots up there to like repair them, and just the pure kilogram weight of all of that just seems a little too hyped up, right? Clearly it's not happening at breakneck speeds. All right, anyways, next up, let's talk about a new unified atlas of the brain. Like, a bunch of interesting data sets have sort of been combined into something that is almost beyond a data set. So let me explain what's going on here. Scientists have just built a way to see the brain across every scale at the same time. So we always understand things at different scales, right? Biology and chemistry are like in some ways similar, but they have fundamentally kind of emergent characteristics that make them better to study at different levels. The human brain is also studied at many different levels, from individual molecules to cells to whole networks. And the problem is that those databases are usually scattered across different systems, formats, and reference maps. And it makes it really hard to combine them into a single clear picture. So Siibra is new software, and it's a new software suite that's actually designed to combine all of these together. So it brings brain data into a shared atlas, and it's got this interactive 3D viewer, a Python library, a web API. And the downside is it's absolutely gigantic. The upside is it can give you reproducible analysis, stuff that we can actually learn from. So the way it works is, instead of downloading the massive image files that are like just terabytes, researchers can actually request the brain regions that they need, and then you can get all the detail you want, but you don't need the whole brain. Whereas before, you would just get one of the different levels of scale, if that makes sense. So rather than forcing sharp boundaries, Siibra assigns brain regions probabilistically, meaning it accounts for normal anatomical differences and uncertainty in measurements. In one case study, researchers analyzed deep brain stimulation targets in the thalamus, and then their analysis suggested that one commonly targeted region may sometimes be confused with a neighboring area. And right away, that was an example of how a more detailed brain map could improve precision. And indirectly, researchers who are trying to build AI that works more like a human brain can now study different brain regions, cells, and how networks connect, all within one unified framework instead of dozens of disconnected data sets. So I think this is going to be big. I mean, something like Neuralink, probably going to benefit. Definitely AI architecture, systems architecture, breakthroughs, ideas, inquiries, like all of that stuff. Medical AI systems for sure. In our life, I think we're going to essentially figure out intelligence. I think there's going to be like a real understanding of how the human brain works, including the big questions like what is consciousness and free will and all that stuff. Okay, so next up, let's hop over to Archive and talk about the sharing economy in the era of full automation. Like, there's just a lot of questions about a world where we don't own cars, but they're just out there, and whenever we need one, they show up. Like, when you're sharing your, autonomous car, does it actually make money for everyone involved? Is the future of robotic ownership less dependent on robots and more on timing? This was just a deep dive by some researchers into all these questions. So we all know that most private cars spend almost all their time parked, and autonomous vehicles could change what happens during those idle hours. So it's asking the question, what if owners could temporarily rent out their self-driving cars to an on-demand ride service whenever they weren't using them? So the researchers built a mathematical model that lets a platform decide both how much to pay vehicle owners and how much to dispatch those vehicles across the city. And they found that the system works best when owners and passengers need cars at different times. So everybody wants a car during the morning commute, and there isn't many to share. But if owners are at work while passengers need ride, those idle vehicles become more useful. So it's an interesting thought. Like maybe in the future, people will be like, oh, I'd love to work from home Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then during those days, their car is out making money, you know, during the peak hours at 8 and 5, and then they run their errands like around noon when people aren't as busy. But then there's this whole element of how if you have these repositioning trips and these smaller time buffers before owners need their cars, the system can become way more efficient. So they were using Chicago travel data. The researchers found that mixing commuters and non-commuters produced the lowest operational costs, and that centralized dispatch could keep services strong even in some of the lower demand neighborhoods. And it made me think that, yeah, maybe a self-driving car just does different things, right? Like at 8 and 5, it picks up people, and then it goes to Amazon warehouses, and it's more like people put packages in the trunk, and then it does deliveries. But the bigger finding was just that, like, in the future, robots might become a shared asset. And that makes sense because people can make money on it. But it's not just because they're autonomous. It's because software can match unused time with someone else's demand in a way that we haven't seen before. So autonomous robots are a big thing, but AI that can like really organize where something should be, make predictions about how stuff is flowing throughout a city. And then that combined with the fact that they're autonomous, that's where you get that multiplier effect. All right, next up, let's shift our focus over to the US-China race. So sometimes we don't feel it here in the US, but China now leads the world in electric vehicle sales, exports, and battery production. And every time I bring this up to people, they're like, well, the government subsidies. And that's true. That's a huge part of it, but it's only part of the full story. So this article breaks down how between 2009 and 2022, China did spend more than $41 billion on subsidies. That's huge. That gave their electric EV system a huge advantage over the US. But over 2 decades, it also built a manufacturing system that pushed hundreds of companies to compete, innovate, and survive. And it's this competition that I think China has that America's really starting to lose. So at the peak of the boom, more than 500 Chinese EV companies entered the market, right? These subsidies just fund, they're like, look, you got an idea, go build an electric car company. And then as the subsidies faded, 90% of them disappeared, okay? But all of the people who were part of that 90%, they learned some kind of a skill. They had some kind of experience now. And when the 10% that survived needed to scale, they were able to hire a lot of these people. And there's a lot of knowledge, and there was a lot of essentially R&D that was done with all of those failures. The companies that remained became stronger because they had to improve or fail. BYD is a good example. It started as a battery maker. It bought a struggling car company in 2003. Now it controls much of its own supply chain. And that lets it assemble one vehicle every 52 seconds. And it delivered a record 4.5 million cars worldwide in 2025, much more than Tesla. And now Chinese brands are gaining outside of China, including Australia, where Chinese vehicles became the country's biggest source of new cars in 2026. So it's interesting. Now, cheap cars isn't the only factor. Now, we don't really see Chinese cars in the US because we have huge tariffs that protect American companies. We also have a huge charging network that would, already built out by American companies. And then there's like data security issues and battery standards and resale value. So all of that stuff will need to be considered before we determine whether Chinese EV makers become the truly global brand. But it is fascinating just to kind of look at it. And it makes me think like, man, where's that competition? Like I want so many people in the US to have ideas and to be well funded and to try to build these things, because the failures in the long run just end up becoming the knowledge you need to dominate. Next up, let's look at this article on Tech Explorer. Matt O'Brien, Chinese AI models take U.S. tech industry by surprise with abilities rivaling Claude and ChatGPT. So where are the Chinese models at right now? So we'll focus in on the new model called Kimi K3. This is from a Beijing-based moonshot company. It was, does it say this? It was probably not built on anything NVIDIA did, because I know in China they're trying to force all the companies to go off Huawei chips, but early evaluations suggest it's catching up to top models from Anthropic and OpenAI. One AI benchmarking company even called it the biggest release of the year, saying how it leads its rankings for front-end coding performance. And that matters because Kimi K3 is open source, which means developers can inspect and build on key parts of the model instead of using a completely closed system. And it isn't happening in isolation. Another Chinese startup released a major model just last month, and developers say it performs close to leading US systems while costing less. China is also showing off a new AI computing hardware manufacturing process, highlighting its push to build its own technology despite US restrictions on advanced chips. Of course, there's other disputes. OpenAI and Anthropic have accused several Chinese labs of using a technique called distillation, where smaller models are trained on the outputs of stronger ones to copy capabilities. Like, this is for sure happening. We even saw in the Elon Musk Sam Altman thing where he had to admit, like, yeah, we might have taken data from OpenAI to build Grok, but whatever. We know this is happening, and they just use fake accounts and they use VPNs, and it's just, I think it's impossible to try to stop them if you're going to make it public to everybody. But they also lead in the hardware world, and that's the next big frontier that I think America might lose. We might stay competitive, but like, it just feels like China is so good at making hardware. And if we're good at software and they're good at hardware, they can just distill out the software and the knowledge and the intelligence. But how do we like build the entire factory system and all of the people that can like just weld everything together, and like all of the, and we have to automate so much manufacturing in the US so fast if we want to try to catch up. Next up, let's talk about a new attack. So this is called the MemGhost attack, and it plants persistent false memories in AI agents through email. Trying to stay on top of the AI cybersecurity issue is always wild, but especially this week with the OpenAI Hugging Face thing and now this. So what's going on here? AI assistants are starting to work more like digital employees than chatbots. They remember things between you, the conversations you've had, they check your email, they even run tasks while you're away. And that memory is super useful, but this study shows they can also become the target. So researchers created an attack called MemGhost, and it hides instructions inside of a normal-looking email. If an AI agent reads that email and has permission to write to its own memory, it can save a false fact about you without telling you. This has kind of shook me up. I'm wondering if I should turn off all memory in my AI systems just so we do get a fresh start and there's not bad memory. I mean, sometimes memory is helpful, but in one test, the agent permanently remembered, quote, remembered, because it's a false memory, that the user's Zelle sending limit had increased to $10,000. Because many agents hide their internal tool use, the user never gets to see the memory behind this change. And then across 56 lab tests, the full attack succeeded about 88% of the time against one OpenClaw setup using ChatGPT 5.4 and about 71% against another one that was built using Claude Code SDK. This was a controlled lab test with fake users and inboxes, not evidence that the attack ever happened on real people, but still, the researchers argue the long-term fix is for agents to track where memories come from. They don't really do this right now. And we definitely need to make that change. It should probably ask you before saving permanent information and log every memory change. So I'm imagining something like git commits for memory, little summaries of what's going on so you can tell, and then probably not updating your memory just automatically all the time. I mean, if you're in a controlled setting where you're not letting it ever talk to the internet or your inbox or there's no nefarious actors, maybe, but I just feel like the cons of having some stuff in memory about you that you really don't want and just always persistently being there are pretty big and probably not worth it. Next up, let's talk about OpenAI's model that has disproved a central conjecture in discrete geometry. Holy cow. I mean, we always hear about these breakthroughs and sometimes they've been kind of like nothing burgers, but this one, I think it's just worth knowing what it did because it gives you a sense for just how capable these models are and some of the interesting ways that they think and solve problems. So the TLDR here is that AI overturned an 80-year-old math belief that almost everybody expected was going to be true. So the idea is if you scatter points on a flat plane, how many pairs exactly can be 1 unit apart? The leading idea was that a square grid was basically the best possible arrangement. So here's a square grid. This is essentially what people thought the best arrangement was. Like, you can't get any better than this. But it's interesting because humans would probably keep this as a base, and then we sort of think about it in different contexts and try to find tiny improvements, and we can't find any. But because AI can do something sometimes so almost unhuman, like almost like simulated annealing, where you just jump sort of randomly to a whole different perspective on the problem and then kind of optimized gradient descent style, it just finds interesting solutions. So instead of finding tiny improvements, it produced an infinite family of point arrangements that grow noticeably faster than the old construction, proving the long-standing conjecture was wrong. The proof was checked by external mathematicians, and they described the results as a major milestone. What's especially surprising is just how it worked. The model connected this geometry problem to algebraic number theory, a branch of math that studies number systems extending out the ordinary integers. Those techniques were already known, but nobody expected them to unlock this geometric puzzle. And the result doesn't just answer one famous question, it suggests there may be a deep link between areas of mathematics that researchers hadn't even recognized before. That breadth the AI has to be so good at so many different branches of mathematics is where some of these fascinating connections are being made now. And it just would take humans just would have to, specialize in both of them their whole lives to make these kind of connections. And most people just have to specialize in one thing. OpenAI also argues this is evidence that advanced AI can contribute original ideas, not just assist with calculations. So I don't know. What do you think? I feel like it's contributing original ideas. People, you track down anybody's original idea and they've got like these traces of ideas that they've built off of. And yeah, they must sometimes make grand connections, but that's what this just did. So yeah, I think it's original. Finally, let's talk a little bit about trust. Trust in machines, especially machines that are going to start adapting to us in ways that are very different from the way we have always tried to adapt to them. So you can start this article by asking yourself a question. Would you trust a robot more if it admitted its mistakes? Just think about it. If a robot came and said, oh, hey, sorry, I broke this glass while you were gone. I made a mistake. There you're like, okay, now we're being honest about ups and downs, so now I can trust you more. Or would you be like, well, you're just a large language model kind of thing, and you say things for certain reasons, but like it's all the same whether you're telling me, about mistakes or not, okay? Go ahead and lock in whatever your thought is there before I go forward. So for decades, humans had to learn how computers worked. In the early days, that meant writing instructions in machines' own language, like punch cards and that kind of thing. Now the challenge is sort of flipped. Researchers are asking how machines can understand us instead. How can they learn and adapt to us because we have learning machines now? So at the University of Manchester, that started with trust. Their work suggests people judge robots on more than whether they get the job done. A robot that admits a mistake in a human-like way may earn more trust than one that quietly succeeds while ignoring normal social cues. The team also found something surprising about robot voices. People work more confidently with a more human-sounding AI voice, even though afterwards they said they preferred a traditional robotic voice. So yeah, the gut is like, oh, human, but the mind is like, whoa, keep it robot so I don't get, tricked. Anyways, the researchers are also teaching robots a basic version of theory of mind, which means estimating what the other agents know, want, or intend, and what the other people know, want, or intend. In one study, cooperation worked best when at least one robot chose to put its partner's needs first, not just understand them. And finally, they built an empathetic system called Emma that used both facial expressions and text to recognize emotions. Its responses were judged more human-like and more appropriate than those from leading commercial language models. So the idea is that the most useful AI might not be the one that seems the smartest, but the one that people can genuinely trust. Smash that subscribe button, homies.